there's Rainbow Lake. Looking east, current flow was toward the viewer. All right, so here we go. So here's Rainbow Lake and Pass from the air is viewed to the northwest. The lake elevation in the pass is 3,590 feet. So right up here is 4,460. So if we go 4,200 minus 3,590, we get 600. So the water at its maximum was 600 feet deep moving through this pass. Then as the water level dropped in Camas Prairie, then you can see that the floor of this was above the floor of Camas Prairie. Right? What did I just say here? 600. So 700, it's still had to get down. It was 1,400 feet deep. So right here it was, say, 600 feet deep. So that means once it had dropped to where the water was 800 feet deep in Camas Prairie, then this would have been isolated. It no longer would have been a spillway. It only was a spillway when the water rose up to 4,200. And it undoubtedly cut a lot of material out of here. But once the water level dropped and was below 800 feet deep, then this was left isolated. And the flow through Rainbow Lake Pass would have stopped at that point. And all of the flow out of the basin would have been through that southern outlet. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at its peak, it was like 600 feet deep through here. And here's 4,200. That line represents 4,200 feet. So there you can see over here, that would have been 600 feet above the floor of Rainbow Lake Pass, and then it would have been another 800 feet down to the floor of the basin.
Yeah, I see.
And that would have been... Yeah, Rainbow Lake Pass exhibits strikingly the effects of a former large and rapid westward flowing current. Above the lake, the floors of both branches have been severely scoured, exposing the bedrock, which remains bare. The floor is furrowed with channel depressions, several of them holding ponds or marshes. Upstream angles of prominent knobs are slightly rounded as by water, and so forth. These features apparently were formed by a huge current swinging from side to side as it moved swiftly through the pass, eroding the outsides of bends and depositing gravel bars on the inside. A huge current. I mean, can you imagine a huge current 1,000 or more feet deep? And here I've done the elevations of the floor. National Bison Range, what do you see? Shorelines, strand lines.
Yep.
So yeah, peak discharge, this is what Randall says, if you want to believe anything that guy says. A peak discharge of 17 plus or minus 3 million cubic meters per second means that flows were somewhere between 14 and 20 million cubic meters per second. A peak flow of 20 million cubic meters per second is equal to, I rounded it off, 800 million cubic feet per second, or about 500 times the volume of the Mississippi River during its greatest historical floods. Okay, so yeah, it said it would top out a little greater than 1 million cubic feet per second. And then you can see some of the handiwork of the floods. This is backwash. And, you know, when you get to these guys, when you realize there's stuff like this all over the world, yes, all over the world, I would say to somebody like a Flint Dibble, when he's so convinced he knows everything that happened more than 12 or 13,000 years ago when it was nothing, basically. And he's always, you know, they're always asking the archaeologists, well, where's the pottery? Where's the evidence? You know, where's the rusted car bodies, I guess, whatever they're thinking. But what I would say is, you know, you look at this, and I would say to somebody like that, how do you know what's in that deposit right there? If this deposit's from 13,000 years ago, where did this stuff come from? Well, this stuff was prior to the flood that put this stuff here, or floods. This was part of some bedrock somewhere. It might have been the floor of a valley. There could have been a village. There could have been a whole city in that valley. You just saw, I just showed you the cross-section there of Clark Fork with a whole urban area for scale. Right? After that water passage, what would you find? of that? Nothing. Nothing. It would have been reduced to rubble. It would have been reduced to gravel. And what are we doing to build our modern civilization? We're quarrying the gravels, the immense gravel deposits that were left behind after these cataclysmic floods. So we're literally building our new modern civilization out of the wreckage of the former world. Houses built upon unstable flood gravels. This was dumb. In fact, I think the last time we drove by, these houses weren't there anymore. Yeah, note bedding layers. But yeah, I mean, this is dumbness.
Yeah.
This is going to be quoted from a book by George Catlin. And George Catlin was an artist who spent many decades traveling amongst Native Americans, living with them, hunting with them, and painting them. So this is from a book.
Last rambles amongst the Indians of the Rocky Mountains
and
the Andes.
Yes. Okay, so he had something very important to say, and just extremely interesting. The American Indians are as distinct from all the other races of the earth as the other races of the earth are distinct from each other. And both in North and South and Central America exhibit but one great original family type, with only the local changes which difference of climate and different modes of life have wrought upon it. And then he goes on to say, I believe they were created on the ground on which they have been found, and that the date of their creation is the same as that of the human species on other parts of the globe. That's very interesting, because nobody believes that today. This belief is founded on the reasons advanced in the foregoing chapter, supported by the traditions of the Indians, which will be noticed, and a strong and unavoidable intuitive disbelief that all the races of man of different colors have descended from one pair of ancestors, involving from necessity the crime of incest, which apparently would be implied. So then he goes on to say this. I'm going to skip a few parts here. Indians are the descendants. Let's see. He's questioning the route by which, if the American Indians, now remember, this is written in the 1800s, if they are descendants of Adam and Eve at the rate that an infant savage population would spread over an uninhabited and desolate country, several thousand years would have been required to populate and move through the vast regions of Kalmuck, Tartary, and Siberia to Bering Strait, a distance of more than 10,000 miles, and from Bering Strait to Central and South America and Tierra del Fuego, 10,000 miles more. So he's talking about, and this gets us right into the discussion of where did North American inhabitants come from? When did they get here? And questions which have not been have not been resolved yet, right? Now, we can go directly to the traditions of the native peoples themselves, which he does here in his book. But I think the point is that he's making is the difficulty of traveling such a great length and distances in a short period of time. And an equal time required, 1,000 years at least, for a civilization to arise sufficient to have built the splendid monuments of Yucatan, and the vast space of time that has transpired since those monuments were depopulated. In all, a space of time far transcending that allowed by sacred history or even by geology for man's appearance on the earth. Now, this is where it gets interesting. The American Indians know nothing of this, yet their traditions and monuments prove beyond a doubt their great antiquity. For of 120 different tribes which I have visited in North and South and Central America, every tribe has related to me, more or less distinctly, their traditions of the deluge, in which 1 or 3 or 8 persons were saved above the waters on the top of a high mountain, and also their peculiar and respective theories of creation. Some of these tribes living at the base of the Rocky Mountains and in the plains of Venezuela, and the Pampa del Sacramento in South America make annual pilgrimages to the fancied summits where the antediluvian species were saved in canoes or otherwise, and under the mysterious regulations of their medicine or mystery men, tended their prayers and sacrifices to the Great Spirit to ensure their exemption from a similar catastrophe. Indian traditions are generally conflicting and soon run into fable. But how strong is the unanimous tradition of the aboriginal races of a whole continent of such an event? How strong a corroboration of the Mosaic account? And what an unanswerable proof that the American Indian is an antediluvian race? And how just a claim does it lay with the various modes and forms which these people practice in celebrating that event? How far these general traditions of a flood relate to a universal deluge, or to local cataclysms, of which there have evidently been one or more over portions of the American continent, or whether there has been a universal deluge and at what period, it is difficult to determine. One thing, however, is certain. The Indian traditions everywhere point distinctly to at least one such event, and among the central and southern tribes they as distinctly point to two such catastrophes in which their race was chiefly destroyed, and the rocks of their countries bear evidence yet more conclusive of the same calamities, which probably swept off the populations in the plains, and, as their traditions say, left scattered remnants on the summits of the Andes and the Rocky Mountains. That's worthy of a for sure.